graduating from Laredo Martin High School and then attending Laredo Junior College before transferring and graduating from Texas A&M University. Senator Flores spent most of his career as a Texas game warden, serving the state for 27 years and achieving the rank of colonel. In this capacity, Senator Flores was responsible for a $60 million budget, 27 field offices, 127 civilian employees, and 532 commissioned Texas game wardens with statewide operational scope and patrol out to 9 nautical miles into the Gulf of Mexico. Senator Flores was the first Hispanic Texas game warden colonel in history. He holds a Texas Master's Peace Officer Certificate, is a graduate of the Governor's Executive Development School from the LBJ School of Government at UT, and is a fellow of the National Conservation Leadership Institute. Senator Flores honorably retired from the state service in 2012 and is an executive coach for the National Association of Conservation Law Enforcement Chiefs Leadership Academy. Senator Flores was elected in a special election in September 2018, becoming the first Hispanic Republican in the Texas Senate and the first Republican to represent Senate District 19 in over 139 years. He lives in Pleasanton and his wife Elizabeth and have two daughters and 2 grandsons. Welcome, Senator Flores. Thank you. And now, I'm going to turn it over back to Aviera that will moderate us.
So at this time, we will give each of the gentlemen a moment to tell us kind of what their outlook is for the upcoming Texas legislative session, what some of their goals are moving into that session, and then we will open it up for Q&A. I believe we decided that Representative King got to go first. There was no rock, paper, scissors, nothing involved. It just kind of happened.
Anyway. Appreciate that. Is the microphone working? No? How about that right there? Good. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I love Southwest Texas Junior College, and I'm a former student here at Southwest Texas Junior College, and also attended Sul Ross State University, and I went several places, and I'm not a Rhodes Scholar, but I went here right after I got out of high school for a year or so, and then went to A&M, and then when I came back after I graduated from A&M, and I moved to Uvalde, well, then I worked on a master's degree at Sul Ross for a little while, and so I didn't finish that degree. I bought my business. I got all the way through to the part where you were writing the big paper, and I bought my business, and said, well, I'm going to drop out, for just a little bit till I get this business thing taken care of. And that was a long time ago, and I never went back. So I've regretted not getting that, finishing up that degree. But I've been representing the Texas House of Representatives, representing this district in different configurations since 1995 is when I got sworn in the first time. And it's a great honor and a privilege to do that. And Uvalde County has been in the district most of the time. The rest of the counties that I represent, some of them have been in it the whole time and others haven't. But the district currently runs from Uvalde County south to Zapata County, 6 counties, runs through Laredo, and almost exactly up and down Highway 83, except Frio County is off to the east there, and that is also in the district. But as most of you in this room know, I'm sure the Texas legislature meets for 140 days every 2 years. During the odd-numbered years. A lot of times it'd be better if they met for 2 days every 140 years, but they don't. And so when they do meet for 140 days, which is generally January through May for the most part, during that course of time I'll talk about the House of Representatives, and then Senator Flores can tell you about the Senate. But in the House, first thing we do is elect the Speaker of the House after we get sworn in on January the 8th coming in. That's when we're going in this year. It's the second Tuesday in January. The Speaker of the House the current Speaker, Joe Strauss III, is retiring from the legislature, and he served as Speaker for 5 terms, which is the most that anybody has served. There are 2 others that have served that length of time also, and he's retiring from the legislature, going back into the private world. And so we had a speaker's race, and it was the first one we've had in a long time. It was wide open speaker's race where there was not an incumbent speaker running for re-election. And there was 7 or so running, and 7 or 8 running actually, and the ones that got in earliest, you know, they were unable to form the coalitions they needed. And so the last guy that got in was the one that, it took him 3 weeks to wrap it up, and he got all the votes here the other day that he needed, commitments he needed in order to be elected speaker. There's 150 members in the House of Representatives, so it requires 76 votes to win. His name is Dennis Bonham, and he's from Angleton, Texas. He's a banker over there, the executive officer, chief executive officer of the name of the bank escapes him, but it's a bank that he started several years ago, along with some other investors and friends of his, and he's been doing that for a while. He's been in the legislature since 1997, and I think he was 24 years old when he got elected to the legislature. I know him very, very well, and he's a good friend, and I think he'll be real good. He's obviously, haven't served in the legislature that long. He's very bipartisan, almost nonpartisan, to be honest with you, and so he's accustomed to the system, and he's served under several different speakers, and so I think his style is going to be that somewhere between Joe Strauss's style and Joe Strauss's immediate predecessor, which was Tom Craddock. Two very different styles of leadership, and I think that Speaker Bonham will be in between those two. He's currently the Speaker Pro Tem and has been for several years, so he already had the title, Mr. Speaker, and he spent a lot of time on the front dais, and so he'll be good, and we look forward to working with him, and certainly glad that the speaker's race is over. It's a very difficult time because you got 7 or 8 people running out of a pool of 150 people. All 7 or 8 of them were good people. They all could have been a good speaker. They just couldn't, for whatever reason, they couldn't put together their coalitions. But it puts us in a real awkward position, trying to pick between your friends. And it's an important role. So after Dennis Bonham gets sworn in as speaker, well, then about a few weeks after that, we'll submit requests for committee assignments. The Speaker makes all the committee assignments. And then after the committee assignments come out, which usually takes a few weeks for them to sort through all of that, well, then we'll start hearing bills in committee. Any given session of the legislature, last time there was 6,617 bills filed. Some of them are duplicates, but that's how many get filed. About 1,200 pass and become law. The governor has his turn at a few. I think he vetoed 50 last time. And so, and you begin to do that, people always wonder where all that legislation comes from. Most of it comes from people like you. The legislators themselves don't think up a lot of that stuff. It's brought to us by individuals in the district, groups, industry people, all sorts of folks. Folks in public education bring us groups, folks in private higher education bring us ideas. Inevitably, after this speech today, Senator Flores and I will be somewhere, and somebody will say, hey, I heard you all over there at the junior college the other day, and I was thinking about what you said, and I got this idea. There's some facet of the current law that needs to be changed. And so those 6,600 pieces of legislation are, for the most part, they're all amendments to current law. And the vast majority of them are fairly non-controversial, but it's difficult to pass a bill through the Texas legislature, and our forefathers set the process up that way on purpose because they didn't like government very much back in those days, and so they made it difficult to change the laws and impose new laws on folks. And so that's the deal. So every session you can kind of see a tone for what's coming up. Last session it was all about bathrooms and guns. And you just knew by this time that that's all you were going to be talking about. And what a session. And so this time it's a lot different tone. It's a much more statesman-like tone, a much more serious tone about what they're doing, and part of that has to do with leadership. Part of it may have to do with the November election. I'm not sure what it is, but and I wasn't expecting that since we're having a new speaker. I was expecting all of those social issues and bathrooms and all of that to come back because there was going to be a new speaker and they were going to make another run at it. But I'm not hearing that so far, and which I think is a good thing, Senator. If you know. But they are talking about some real red meat, bread and butter issues, not red meat, but bread and butter issues, and that is Speaker Bonham has made it clear that the only thing he wants to work on really is school finance. And so the two big issues that I hear a lot about nowadays are property taxes and, of course, school finance issues and school governance issues. And those are really the same issue. I mean, because essentially school finance is property tax reform. because so much of our property tax bill, somewhere between 50 and 60% of it, is your school property taxes, your local school property taxes. It's a monumental issue. Typically in the past, when we've done it, we've been under some kind of court order that we had to do it. And the state of Texas has lost every one of those suits until the last one. And I thought we were going to lose that one. I gave these speeches all over the district telling people we're going to lose this suit and we're going to work on school finance last session. And lo and behold, the state did not lose the suit, but the judges did opine that while it meets the very minimum it barely meets the standards to still be legal and constitutional, it ain't good. And so that is what they told us, and so the judges were clear that they recommended that we look at it. And Joe Strauss worked on it, Speaker Strauss worked on it last time, and he couldn't get all the momentum that he needed. And so this time we're going to work on it again. And I look forward to it because it's a real issue that affects people in real ways and has a profound influence long-term on the state of Texas. It's not an easy issue. The state of Texas, we don't have that many pools of money. We get money from sales taxes. We get money from the federal government, which usually is, we just administer that money. Typically it's sent to us for a specific purpose. Sales taxes, oil and gas severance taxes, and a fee on everything that moves. And so those are the way that you get your money. And those taxes, everybody thinks they already pay enough fees. They think they pay enough sales taxes, and the oil and gas companies certainly think they pay enough severance tax. And so when you're talking about shifting money away from local property taxes to the state, which should be done. The state used to pay 60% of the bill back in the day for public education. Now they pay about 40% or a little less perhaps, and the rest of it is paid by local property taxes. It's a real issue. So far, I've watched carefully. I haven't seen anybody stand up, raise their hand up, and volunteer to pay more taxes. But if you see them, let us know, because we want to know who they are. And so that's going to be the big issue of the session. In addition to that, you're going to have issues about eminent domain. I drafted the legislation for the Farm Bureau and the cattle raisers, and they're going to be interested in eminent domain. It's been an issue that's been around for a while. They worked on it really hard last time, but it fell apart at the end. Here locally, we've got local water issues. The Edwards Aquifer Authority is involved in a lawsuit with the Uvalde County Underground Water Conservation District. They're looking at some kind of legislation to get them out of that box, and we'll see how that goes. There's always public education issues, more money for the schools, more money for higher education, a whole lot more money for junior colleges, we hope. And but it's a tough budgetary session. We had 2 bad hurricanes since the last time we met 2 years ago. And there's a lot of state infrastructure that was damaged that we need to repair. So you've got a big expense there. You got 160,000 new kids in the school system. So you have enrollment growth costs that you need to take care of. The federal government constantly tells us that we don't take care of our special needs kids the way that they think we should. That's an expensive proposition. And so there's a lot of issues that are going to require money, not to mention property tax reform. And so it's going to be a tough budget session. We have retired teachers that are in desperate need of a pay raise on their annuity checks. And their system, while it's very, very strong, it technically is not considered actuarially sound, because it could be considered actuarially sound. Most of you in this room probably know it means you can meet your obligations for the next 30 years, I believe it is. They're like 97, 95, 98% actuarially sound. I mean, they're very sound, particularly when you look at a lot of municipal retirement authorities around the state that are 40% funded, some of them underwater, and in other parts of the country. But the Constitution, we're not allowed to give retired teachers an increase in their annuity pay until the fund is actuarially sound. In order to get that fund actuarially sound, you've got to either figure out a way for your investments to bring in a lot more money, which is hard to do, or you got to put a bunch of money in there, and that comes from the state, or I mean, theoretically it could come from active teachers, and but you don't want to do that because they're not getting paid enough either. So that's going to be an expensive proposition that we've been kind of kicking that can down the road for a few years. But so there's a lot of things out there with money. The first week in January, the comptroller, Zen Hager's going to give us his budget estimate. And the way it works in Texas is he gives you the budget estimate for the next 2 years, and that is all the money you can spend. The Constitution prohibits the state of Texas from spending any more than that budget estimate. It's in the state constitution, unlike most other states. So we don't borrow much money to balance the budget like the federal government, and there again, like most other states. And I've always believed that was a good thing. It maintains a certain amount of discipline in your budgeting process. It keeps everybody realistic. It keeps you from getting in over your head on a lot of areas. But I think that it's going to be interesting to see what the comptroller says. Oil prices, oil and gas surface taxes are a big part of the revenue stream. Oil was $70 a month and a half ago, $50 yesterday or something like that. That makes a huge change in the amount of revenue that the state of Texas has. Our hope is that the comptroller believes the price of oil is going to recover quite a bit in the next 2 years, and the income is going to be good. We're going to see what he comes up with. Preliminary estimates have been pretty conservative, but we'll see. And sometimes they come up with an amended estimate later on in the session. So that's enough out of me at this time. Senator Flores?
That sounds good. Well, thank you, and that's very comprehensive and all true. I have my first time I ever came here was. First time I ever came here was I was a member of the livestock judging team of the FFA with Laredo Martin, and came up here to Uvalde, and so I have very, very fond memories from way back then, and of Southwest Texas Junior College, and it was very pleasant. And so my background is I'm from an Air Force family, one of 10 children. So and I attended junior college, Laredo Junior College. So I have that experience. We weren't wealthy, so I understand the value of junior colleges, what it meant to me, and of course the qualifications for you, the Pell Grant and all the other things that we needed. But I also understood the value of working hard, and I've done a number of things. Worked cows, sold pottery, you name it. As long as it was legal, I was doing it. But I was in junior college. I had the privilege of serving in the student government as the vice president of the student government, and I was the ex officio member on the board of trustees. I was a student representative on the board. That was a very educational thing for me, and so it's of course then I went to A&M, worked my way through. A&M working at the vet school. I worked on the vet farm. I cowboyed for the brucellosis project, and I was a full-time employee, so that saved me a lot of money. It took a little longer, but eventually managed it. So in the further background, just before I had the privilege to become a Texas game warden, and I graduated in '83 and became a game warden on January the 1st or January the 2nd of '85. And served 27 years across the state. And finishing my tour of duty in Austin as Director of Law Enforcement, where I had met with Representative King on a number of occasions. I want to say that I have the highest respect for him and his knowledge and ability. I respect his opinion. I value his friendship. You can see we kind of dress the same. And it's always good. We get teased about wearing our hats, don't we? But we're Texans. That's the way we roll. And if I go anywhere without it, they won't recognize me. I went into a facility the other day, and the first thing I said, "Y tu sombrero, and where's your hat?" They didn't recognize. But so you can see our values are the same. Plus we're Aggies, and we have the privilege to represent you. As we go forward, if you remember my campaign, we campaigned on base issues. We stayed out of the weeds because, you don't have time for that. And if you remember, property taxes was very important to us. Infrastructure was very important to us. Public education was important to us. Public safety was important to us. We have, to give you a preface of this size and scope of Senate District 19, I represent a third of the city of San Antonio, the 7th largest city in the United States. That in itself is a daunting, by saying the diversity that I represent. Have the privilege to represent. It goes from Universal City, through Kirby, through the south side, the west side, to the Alamo Ranch area, to the affluent areas of La Cantera. And I live in Atascosa County, 10,000 people, Pleasanton, Texas. Of course, we're deep in the heart of the Eagle Ford Shale. And going up to Eagle Pass, and then 460 miles of river with Mexico. Going all the way to Alpine, Fort Stockton, and to the New Mexico state line just south of Carlsbad, New Mexico, and Pecos. Back to Ozona, in Edwards County, to Rock Springs, Real, and back to Medina, and then back to I-10 at right there at La Cantera. You can fit the state of Maine inside this district, but the diversity itself is the challenge. One of the challenges is to be able to represent them all of them, whether you're in Sanderson, Uvalde, San Antonio, Ozona. I'm here to represent everyone, and so it's been a little bit lacking in the past in that area, and we hope to work very hard to do that. My background as a state game warden, we're only as effective as the community allows us to do, and we do that by relationships and knowing what you need and being responsive to that need. And when I went in there to catch someone on your ranch, I didn't come back and say, by the way, remember that, and you owe me that. Well, no, you don't. You don't owe me anything. That was what you paid me to do. That was my duty, and it's the same thing here. When I perform a service, or when our people perform a service, that's what we're supposed to do. And you owe nothing. We owe you. We are your employees. We are your servant. And I believe that in my heart, and that's the way we are going to operate. So there's none of this favor business. We're here to conduct the people's business, your business, and for that we need to continue to have a relationship with each and every one of you, and in these counties, each and every one of the counties. So know what your issues are in the wide range of this district, so that we can represent you effectively. So as we go into the session, and I did four sessions there, because as Colonel I worked with both sides of the House and the Senate, and Representative King can remember that. So, and I didn't go there as a Republican or a Democrat colonel. I was a colonel. And my job was to perform the function you paid me for. So I had relationships that are long-standing both on the House and the Senate, Democrat and Republican. I understand how agencies work. I've been through the process for budget, intimately 4 times. So I know how it's formulated and how it's executed, or not executed. And so that will help us, bring us a lot of we're not going in green. We're going in a little battle time. And so these long-term relationships are going to be very beneficial for the effectiveness of our representation of you in the Senate. So the 31 members in the Senate. So it's a lot less members in the House. So it was how many members in the House? 150?
Yes, 150.
150. So 150 votes in the Senate, but you need pretty much 19 of those votes in the Senate to get things done, and that 19 votes, so of the 31. So every vote counts. So it's a great equalizer in both chambers, but I think especially so when you have less number. And anything that gets done in the legislative process has to go through the House, and then it must go through the Senate. So in bills that we will work together on for the mutual benefit of our constituents, I'll depend on Representative King in the House, and he and me in the Senate, and we know each other. That's the first thing. And I know in my heart of hearts that he believes that he's here to represent you like I believe that. While we may have some philosophical differences with the party, they're not really that far apart. And so working with the President of the Senate, unlike in the House, with the President of the Senate is Dan Patrick, our Lieutenant Governor. So he is the President. So he will be determining what committees I will be on, and that will happen in January. And the committees that I've asked for are, the first one is Senate Natural Resources. And Senate Natural Resources, for the obvious reason that we have in Senate District 19. We have the 3 largest oil field plays in our district. We are the oil district, if you will, for Texas. oil and gas, a multi-generational play, critically important to Texas and strategically to the United States and energy independence. We know that. But there's a lot of things that come along, good and bad, with having big oil field plays to our small towns and communities. Secondly, I've asked for Senate Finance. Well, you know, everything's, and you ask for things, if you think about it, the odds are pretty good. It's 50-50, yes or no. You know, so ask. And so I did. And while freshmen are generally not put on there have been freshmen put on there in the past. And I'm counting on my expertise in the process, both in the formulation and execution, to be able to be of great bearing in the Lieutenant Governor's decision whether he puts me on Senate Finance. Senate Finance is extremely important, as the Representative King can tell you. If you're on appropriations on the House side, very, very, very important position. But that's the budget. The main reason why we're being called every 2 years in the first place, and the primary mission of the legislature is to formulate a budget. So that's where things can happen. That's where we can get our fair share in our district. That we can make sure that everybody in Texas gets their fair share, not one more than the other, which tends to happen at times when you don't have aggressive representation. But we will do that. And I know Tracy has, and to be able to Pete will. So I've also asked for Senate Ag because of my experience in ag, and of course it also entails wildlife. So it's things that I'm going to have subject matter expertise on. And fourthly, I've asked for criminal justice, and because I am a peace officer. That's what I do. That's who I am. That's what I've done my entire life. So I know what it's like to be a peace officer, from dealing as a patrolman all the way to managing a division, a statewide operational division. And I also know the hazards firsthand of what it is that our first responders and our peace officers do firsthand. I've had the, well, I'll say it's the dark part of my career as colonel was when I had to bury 3 of my officers killed in the line of duty. I understand this clearly and what that means, not to them, not to Texas, but to that family, and the sacrifices made. So I bring that when we start talking about criminal justice, and especially our officers, you know, if we start talking about funding like vests, like last time, Representative, I believe that came about funding vests for protection against rifles after that shooting in Dallas. Well, there's not just a one-time buy. You have to understand that they have a 5-year shelf life, and you got to have a replacement. Which means if you make the initial investment, you better be prepared when you made that decision to continue to replace them. Otherwise, it's just a Band-Aid. These are things like that I bring to the table. So, what is the session going to look like? It's you know I campaigned on, and I'm proud to report that at least what I'm hearing in the Senate and from a lot of colleagues in the House, both Democrats and Republicans, but especially since we're talking about the Senate. This is going to be an effort for, as Representative said, meat and potatoes. And which it should be all along. The business of governance is to provide the pillars of the things that contribute to our quality of life, to our economic value, to our public safety, to our education. Those are the core issues that I campaigned on, and I'm glad to see that that's going to be the emphasis, at least in the Senate. That, as I understand them going forward, the primary drivers, property tax reform, school finance, are tied together, as the representative said, they are. So in property tax reform, it has to be, we all want to pay our fair share. We all do. I do, you do, but it's got to be fair and equitable. And it's not. It's just not. I'm a state retiree on fixed income, so anytime this system is not working right, we suffer for that. And when the appraisals go up, we get hit. And those of us that have our taxes tied in escrow, guess what? Your mortgage just went up. And if your income stays the same, you're in trouble. And you know, we have a lot of gentrification in the cities, and they're in trouble. So as we move forward on that, we want to look to be able to do this right. We believe that you need to approach the system holistically, not just one part. Last time it was only discussing about caps, and we couldn't agree between the House and the Senate as to where that caps would be. It only affected a certain group, but it didn't affect everybody. It needs to affect everybody. It has to be holistic. But in order to be effectively and fair and equitable, we also have to address the side that deals with the appraisals, the appraisal districts, and how they're run, and how they arrive at your appraisals, and how they're governed. And it would scare you to learn how what that system is right now. It is well, our Constitution and government runs on checks and balances, and folks, they don't exist very much on that with them. And so my first bill, for example, Senate Bill 211, was a bill that was filed before and got vetoed, but we fixed it up a little bit and made it more acceptable. Which basically says, you know, we want to do things that are meaningful. Which basically says that if you have your ad valorem protest and you go before the appraisal district, first of all, it said that they may review your affidavits. Yeah, we may look at it. Well, we put it to you shall look at it. For one, you the citizen, shouldn't be wasting your time. And that process is there to determine what's best for you, the citizen, and not best for the system. Secondly, if the dollar amount is $5,000 or less, well, currently in Justice of the Peace Court, $10,000 or less, you can go with any civil matter. So that should fall within the range of a JP court. So why should you have to file a lawsuit, go through all that expense, hire an attorney, go for a whole year to protest, when you could do this in the People's Court and be a lot faster, a lot quicker? You may and probably won't need an attorney, probably not. And so that's the crux of that bill. Currently, it's filed locally for Atascosa County, but we intend to expand it. We put it in there to get an early number. So we got 211, which is good, which doesn't always guarantee, but I think it's a bill that went. Do you remember that one, Representative? Ryan Guillen was the author last time on the House side. So it's that type of legislation that I'm interested in. It is part of the holistic package that will be presented in the Senate in the form of an omnibus bill, and so but it has to be holistic, and it has to tie in with school finance in a manner that it's our responsibility and duty to make sure that Texas and Texas students, the Texas economy, your quality of life, your public safety, that those things, those core issues are being handled. And we have a limited budget, so we have to make hard decisions. You know, what is absent, what are the things you must have, and what are the things you want to have? It's just like our own personal budget. It's the same thing. Hard decisions are made at home, and when you don't make those hard decisions, well, you know what happens to your personal budget. It should be no different in government, and that's why we have the constitutional amendment that it'll be balanced. You know, hopefully someday our federal budget should have that same constitutional requirement as well. We have to do it at home. Why should government be any different? So we make, but most of that budget is already accounted for. About 85 or 87% is already set in handling, Medicaid and things of that nature, health and human services. So we only have like roughly 15% to work with. But what we do as we move forward is to handle these meat and potato issues. And we have to vote, not so much vote to be reelected, but vote to do the right thing. And sometimes it's time to be courageous about things. When you look at systems, are we working to maintain a system? Or are we working to maintain a good quality process for us, for the citizens? It's a win-win deal for all of us, and we get what we want. I think we need to concentrate on all of us agreeing on what our goal and objective is, and don't get bogged down in the weeds, which happens in government. That's my experience. That we say, oh yes, we want to do that, but what about this, and you get bogged down. But that's the beauty of the legislative process, is to be able to work through that. But the thing is to get it done. Do we agree that we need to have fair and equitable property taxes? Yes. Do we agree that we want our public schools, that we have good financing? You know, we have the same formula for school financing since 1984. 1984? That's a big problem right there. And why has it not changed? Well, you know, we get used to things, and we get uncomfortable with change. And sometimes we don't have well, I don't know how that's going to work, and how does it affect me as opposed to how it affects us all. Those are going to be some of the big decisions made in the next session on a number of issues. But as long as we say we understand that we're there to make sure that our core items are handled first. And yes, there will be other issues come up. Absolutely. And we want to listen absolutely to every idea you have, every request, because you're the boss. We want to know what you, the boss, think. What's good for our community? What's good for our education system? We're open to that. I am, and I believe in my heart of hearts, so is the representative. The time I've known him, he's a good man. So it's not going to, if I say that we're going to agree all the time, probably not. But we're going to agree most of the time. That, probably so. Because we want the same thing, and we both work for you. We have a lot of work to do, and for example, some of the other bills I'm considering are things that are of interest to me, because this is what you told me that you wanted. I campaigned for 3 years, so I got to hear a lot of input from across the district. And every county has their own interests, because we're our own communities, but there's certain things that are common themes. Property tax was the #1 I heard across the board. Property tax reform, especially in the appraisal process. Every county I was in, every one of them. I don't care whether you were wealthy, whether you were poor, whether you're in the middle income, that was across the board. So we're going to work on it. And so my first bill reflects that. Secondly, we have, with the issue of education, I firmly believe that we're going to start with, let's look at that 1984 formula, and let's bring it up to 2018. And then not only bring it up to 2018, but to set up the base for the future. It's anything that we do that has investment and time where the costs are so high, requires you to not only look and take care of the right now, but make sure that it's viable for tomorrow. Because so often in government, in my experience, you just put Band-Aids on things. Or you kick the can down the road. Or you blame each other. And you point fingers. Or it bogs down because one or two groups will just squat because of their particular issues at the expense of the 99%. That 1% says no, and the whole thing drops. Dies. So it's going to be very interesting, this session. And we want to look at education as well, holistically. Not only to meet our constitutional requirement to fund public schools, but also to meet the constitutional requirement that they be efficiently run. And that's always been the issue. We've met constitutional muster, but barely. We shouldn't. We should meet constitutional muster. I'm a constitutionalist. I believe in the Constitution. I took an oath to uphold the Constitution when I was 24 years old. I retook it on the 12th of October, and I meant it. It wasn't just an exercise. So I mean to carry it out. So the other thing is, in this play of ours, with the 3 big plays, I mean, our infrastructure is getting pounded. And our people you have 10,000 people in your town, and next minute they're 40,000 and 50,000. There's not enough health care there, there's not enough schools there. Of course, companies need to bring in, their employees, but so they're bringing your employees, you're going to bring in your families, and especially when you have multi-generational plays like we have here. We have the Eagle Ford here, we have the Delaware in the district, and we have the Permian in our district. So that these are all things, our infrastructure, and infrastructure involves everything from our highways to our water. These are all things that are our rail, our pipelines, and these are all things that are big, strategic, long-term issues for this district, and also for here in Uvalde County. Water is a big issue, and we're going to continue. We're going to work on that. You know, hopefully we can get. The best way to do things in anything is to be able to get everyone to agree, or get to at least use the Marine Corps rule. At least get them at least to 75%, and then charge the hill. So hopefully we can get there. I know where we're at on that, Representative. We'll talk about some more, and we get the counties that we represent to agree, which is sometimes is difficult, but you know, there's got to be core things in the water issues and water. I mean, we can't live without it. We've got to maintain our water. It's not only important for us as humans to survive, but it's critically important for industry and economic value. It has huge economic value. Probably more valuable than gold. And that, in the future, even more so. Public safety is the other third thing that I heard in the district, and because that comes with quality of life. And that includes our 460 miles of border. And I can tell you, the experience I bring is I grew up on the border. I've actually I'm probably the only member in the local legislature who has, in a law enforcement capacity, patrolled the border, been on the ranches with the ranchers on the border in the communities, and understand the complexities there. But I also understand the deep, long relationship that we have with Mexico. I have family in Mexico. We've done trade with Mexico. It's probably our biggest trading partner for the state of Texas. We're culturally the same. And I worked in my official capacity with Mexican governments. As a matter of fact, under my watch, we had some of the first Mexican state game wardens in their history trained in our academy in Texas. Because the federal government controlled it all, that they allowed the northern states to be able to handle their wildlife resources, so they needed game wardens, so they send them. We said, come to us. So we work with those governments and understand how that works with them. Very important. Those three things are very important. But those are three things that I campaigned on because that's what I heard as the top three issues. So I intend to carry them out. But that doesn't mean that everything else that's coming about. For example, I will be enjoying some legislation on mental health. I co-signed a bill with Jane Nelson for a mental health bill. And also we have the San Antonio State Hospital in San Antonio, which is one of the three, I believe, that's in the state, one in Austin and one in Rusk. And they are some of our most defenseless folks. They're not there by choice. And so long as we have them in that hospital, we need to care for them. But it's been there since like the 50s with minimal improvement. And we need to do better than that. And so I will be visiting that state hospital with Senator Kirk Watson, who's a Democrat. But that's nothing to do about being a Democrat. We both have, he has a state hospital, I have a state hospital. Just make sure that it represents Texas. Texas, it's a Texas institution. So they are under our care. So let's make sure that is not substandard or third world. Because they can't help. For example, so I can go on and on a number of issues one that I co-signed with Senator Koporsk, as in this county and other counties in this district and I'm sure the representative will agree, some of the big economic drivers for our district is our state parks. Huge economic drivers. Look at what Garner brings here and the people that it brings. And the millions of dollars to our economy. But currently they're funded by the sporting goods sales tax, which the representative supported, I believe, which pretty much dedicated 96% to state parks funding and 4% to the historical commission from sporting goods sales tax. But generally, as it works out in government, people tend to interpret what the representative wrote, and then they decide this is what he meant, and they do something different, and then you end up getting 80% or whatever to balance the budget. Well, what we're proposing is a constitutional amendment that where you, the voters, will decide and direct that sporting goods sales tax, but that 96% and 4%. The 96% will go to fund state parks because of the economic value to the state, and plus our city dwellers, which are by God the biggest population. They have nowhere else to go, and this provides them a place to go, and they come here, and they provide great efforts to your millions of dollars to your economy in our rural counties, and most of the jewels of the system are in this district, and a huge economic drive. It's something we're all very proud of. So that bill is I'm proud to be enjoying with Senator Colcourse on that. I'm sure it'll be sponsored in the House, and we're very confident that's something that you, the voters, will say, yes, that's quality of life for all of us. So things like that across the board, the health issues. I mean, we're being bombarded. I have my full staff is in Austin. I will be opening up my office in San Antonio at A&M San Antonio. Congressman Hurd's already there, so might as well just see their congressman and see the senator at the same time, and stays in South San. I'll be opening up an office in Del Rio, and with satellite offices here and all the other county seats, so it'll be like a circuit. So you'll have access to a district rep who will be there to help you with your issues, especially as they pertain to dealing with agencies and things of that nature. Then I'll be opening up an office in Fort Stockton, and it was in Pecos, but I felt that Fort Stockton, due to feedback from the area, that was more centrally located, and that we established those satellite offices in all the other in the county seats, in Fort Stockton, in Ozona, in Alpine, for example, and be able to be effective that way. So my chief of staff is someone who represented King Hills very well, Harold Stone, and he first rate. We got a first rate chief of staff working for you, and someone who knows how things work, who has relationships with representatives like Representative King, long term, 31 years that he's worked there. And so I'm very fortunate that we were able to get him to work for us. But I can go on and on all day like an old mud flap. So you just got to just. So with that, Representative, will be whatever's next.
Well, what's next is the fun part, is the question and answers. And but before we get there, I just want to tell you how grateful I am for the opportunity to represent you in the Texas House of Representatives, and look forward to doing it for a lot longer. So with that, we'll be glad to take any questions. I don't hear well, so speak up, or maybe Ms. Haynes can repeat the questions.
Mr. Kimball has a microphone here for us to use, and so we will open the floor up for questions at this time. We've got all kinds of, everybody's hands going up. I like it. It's good.
Well, is it on?
No.
Hello? Oh,
No,
yes.
it is.
This is going to sound trivial after all these important things you brought up. But twice a year we go through something called a time change, in November and then in March. And I want you to know that in March, it takes me a solid month to get used to the schedule. People at church think I have gone inactive because I can't get to church on time Sunday morning. For the last 30 or 40 years, I've been talking to people, how do you like the time change? And the number one answer I get is, I hate that stupid thing. So I was wondering, gentlemen, if we could possibly quit changing the time?
Well, that is a biennial issue that has come up many times, and I saw that our good friend Lyle Larson filed a bill in the legislature, and he's filed it before. And I'm not a fan of daylight savings time, but a lot of people are. And not so much in our part of the world, but in other parts of the state they are. And so we will see what happens. It puts you, the state of Arizona doesn't observe it. And I was asked that question earlier today, what does it mean? And it puts you in a little bit of an awkward position in terms of your neighboring states and things like that that are also in the Central Standard Time. But nonetheless, I think it's an issue that at some point in time I think it's outlived its usefulness personally, but we will see. My wife is a big fan of it, by the way, so puts me in a little bit of an awkward position. But the good news is that you're late for church for a month, but then for the rest of the year, that when the time changes back, you're there an hour early.
I believe the bill is filed by Representative Larson, and I think Jose Menendez on the Senate side, Senator Jose Menendez. So that's bipartisan. I'll tell you that I'll just share with you that Texas has two time zones already. And I had, when I was regional director in San Angelo, my office in El Paso was in Mountain Time. So there's always a story of a new regional director showed up, and he'd call over there at 8 in the morning, and he'd call and no one would answer, and he'd get madder and madder, and finally when they answered, they had to remind them that they were in Mountain Time. So this is something that we already have in Texas, where we have two time zones. So and I've gotten a lot of requests from our constituents, and especially in the western part of the state, to get rid of it, and so I'll go for it.
Hi, my name is Michael Ortiz. I am a math professor, not here at the junior college, but at Sul Ross State University, Rio Grande College. We rent a building next door. And I grew up in Valley High, if you know where that is, and in Casterville. And
It was there last night.
Okay, well, I saw you in the parade there, I think, on the 4th of July. My parents still live there. I went to UT, sorry. Came down here immediately after, and I've been here about 10 years now as a professor. And I really love this region that I serve, and I have a lot of ideas about the future of higher education in my region, and that I would really love to be able to share. Unfortunately, the president of my university contacted me this morning to tell me that I'm not allowed to speak to either of you about my ideas about the future of higher ed in this region. I have, and that would be grounds for dismissal if I did, I have a wife and 3 kids depending on me, so I'm not going to mess with that. So therefore, I'm just going to limit myself to asking a very general question about, how do you see the status of higher education in the districts that you serve, and how do you see the future of higher education?
Well, that's a great question, and I represented Medina County in the legislature for 16 years, and my wife's family's all from there, a very large family over in that part of the world. And it's some great folks, and part where you're talking about each of them, they've had a tremendous amount of growth. It's really changed the culture there to a certain extent. But and I'm sorry that you got that that message from the president of the university, because I always look forward to hearing from people on the ground that work at the different things. But sometimes state agencies are pretty particular about that kind of stuff, depending on. You know exactly what I'm talking about, I'm sure.
I would have had to report just being here with you.
And so it was, but I'm obviously a big fan of higher education, and I'm particularly a big fan of Rio Grande College and Southwest Texas Junior College and the other community colleges that I represent, Laredo, LCC, or LC now they call it Laredo College. And the Texas A&M International University has a branch also down there, or that's where their campus is, Texas A&M International University. And I've always said that the main economic development tool we have in our part of the world is a good education and higher education. And so I think it's the tool that we can use to raise the income ability and the income earning ability of all of our citizens. It's the #1 tool that we have out there. And so it deserves all of the attention that we can get. Now, the issue, quite candidly, for higher education, from a funding standpoint, is this. Public education has a constitutional requirement to be efficient, and equitable. Not adequate, but it should, but it doesn't have that in there, but it does have required to be efficient. So you have these periodic lawsuits, which traditionally have forced the state's hand into spending more money in public education. The prisoners of all things, they've sued and had federal judges demand that you do certain things for prisoners. Certainly the special needs kids and those health issues have sued over the years. So they have lawsuit, federal decrees that say you have to spend more money. So they have leverage, so to speak. Unfortunately, higher education doesn't have that kind of leverage. But what you do have is the folks that have graduated from those institutions that maintain relationships and lobby on your behalf. And so I think it's very, very important, but I'm just speaking candidly and telling you that you don't have, unfortunately, quite the leverage that some of these other people do, and that's the reality of why sometimes people always question me about, well, how come higher education or the junior colleges didn't get quite as much money as it looks like they could have gotten when public schools got this, and that's the difference, quite honestly. So, but I'm a huge fan of it. I'm a big supporter of public education, of higher education and public education, and I know we're going to work, and I know the senator will also work very, very hard to try and ensure that the institutions within our legislative districts get our share of the pie.
And as I said earlier, here I am. I'm having the privilege to be able to represent you in the Senate, and I am a product of junior college and the opportunities that of a junior college presents, and the value of a junior college. So there's no substitute for that, I think, and that first-hand experience, and then I'll bring that to the Senate. Of course, higher education is very important. There's 10 of us in my family, and 9 of us have college degrees. But that doesn't mean that my one brother who doesn't, that you make him any less.
He's the richest one, probably.
But well, that's where I'm going. That's where I'm going here. I'm headed that way. You're reading my mind. Higher education is here, just like the programs you have here. You also have programs where you have certificates. And did you know that the average age of a skilled worker in Texas is 50? 50. 50. Unsustainable. As our population increases, I'm my plumber. $200 an hour. An HVAC person, can you do without your HVAC person? I know I can't. I just spent about $6,000 to replace my whole system, and he was proud that he earned every penny. And can we do it without him? And but all these come from now. All these skills, these skilled labor that we need, is where junior colleges come in. And in my humble opinion, and to provide those certificates that are absolutely strategically necessary, and to me they are higher education, anything above high school. Is that correct?
Yes.
So it's not just about we have our engineers and we need them. We have our PhDs and we need them. We have our masters and we need them. But Texas desperately needs skilled workers. We're bringing them from out of state when we have our own kids here. I spoke to the oil field industry yesterday about this, and the contracting and construction industry about that a couple of weeks before that. That we have programs like you have here at Southwest Texas Junior College, and a few others. But if we're going to continue to develop this economy with the increasing population and demands on the infrastructure, with skilled labor at average age of 50, you all are educated, it's unsustainable. So we have to recruit to be, and indeed increase it by providing opportunity in our communities, in our small towns, on the south side of San Antonio, on the west side, on the southeast side, and not all kids are going to want to go get a 4-year degree. But at the Toyota plant in San Antonio on the line, without a college degree, they can make $80,000. That's pretty good. The median income is $35,000. And they're desperate. The construction industry is desperate. They need professor that be taught mathematics to come out of high school to be able to be adept at mathematics, logic, reasoning, be able to write, communicate. These make for the type of workers that are people that are competent with computers and technology, so they can go into industry, the industries that support the infrastructure and the quality of life that we are used to, and that as our increasing population is going to put every much more demands. We have the talent here. So that's a component. I mean, it goes without saying, yes, a college degree, I mean, I have mine, you have yours, and it increases your value of it, exponentially. But futurists will say, and the facts say, that in the future it's going to be those that have the 2-year degrees, the certificates, that are going to be making as much or more, and in much more demand. Because that's the facts. That's just the facts. So I'm looking forward to being able to help as we go forward in reformulating things and discussing things, that particular factor is given more emphasis than it has in the past. Why? We absolutely need them. And at this pace, we're just going to have to continue to bring our labor from out of state, and our Texas children will be left behind on that.
Additional questions? Yes. Down there.
We have one. I think I'm pretty loud enough that everybody can hear me. I'm glad to hear that you guys are for higher education. With us receiving great education here at junior colleges like Southwest Texas Junior College, as we look at transferring to higher education, or universities rather, like Texas Tech or Texas A&M, how can we ensure that our core credits are transferable to these upper universities, specifically for science majors, for example? How do we ensure that our biology classes, microbiology classes, are taken so that we don't waste a year of, in the process and have to retake those classes at that university?
That's a great question, and before I answer that, I've often said that the very first elected office that I ever had to campaign for was on the student senate here at Southwest Texas Junior College, and I won a seat there and enjoyed it immensely. The issue that you talk about is an old issue. I know when I went to school, of course, I checked ahead of time to see what the classes, whether or not they would transfer or not before I ever took them. When I transferred from junior college to A&M, I lost 1 credit, and that was for freshman orientation. But there's a new issue that's come around that the senator and I just heard about recently, where it was brought to our attention that particularly in the dual credit classes, that some of the universities were not accepting those. And so I think that's something that we need to look into, and I plan to contact some of the bigger systems immediately and ask them, and I'd like to know which systems it is, by the way, that we're talking about in particular, and ask them what we need to do to make sure, because that's just a waste of, those classes are subsidized by the taxpayers, and it's just a waste of money in order for a child to take and end up with a dozen different credits that they can't use. Education is never wasted, but it certainly would be helpful given today's environment if everything they took was applied toward their degree program.
Thank you. And similarly, when I went to junior college, well, I made sure that what's transferable. Questions I asked beforehand. But this is not an issue I've not heard from Palo Alto and some of the other junior colleges in San Antonio. And one would think that if you're operating a state college or university, that these are those type of issues, or that there's nothing that's being done in a state college or university that's not transferable. Otherwise, they're supposed to be regulated by the same agencies. They're supposed to be following the same rules. So to say one publicly funded university saying to a publicly funded college, we don't think we're going to take that doesn't make much sense to this old South Texas boy. So you know, would that be, a lot of times that has to just, that's done with, through the regulatory process, or it's a policy as opposed to a statute. But that's where so if it's something statutory, you know, again, my experience of government says whenever I would run into snags, you know, and with dealing with whatever, where it be purchasing, being with contracting, I mean, I would ask, is this statute or is this policy? And if it's the statute, show it to me. And if it's policy, then it's negotiable. And most of the time it was just one group in one area that decided that's the way they wanted to do it. And it was based on no policy and based on no statute. So that's where we come in working as your senator and state rep, and be able to have our chiefs of staff and our staff ask those official questions. Well, we have the privilege to be able to summon them and say, come tell us about this show. We can ask that question. Is this statute? Of course, we'll already have researched it, but or is this regulation? And show us. Tell us why you don't do this, but we need to know who they are. And that's again goes back to the core representation. So, but if it's something statutory, then you know, I think that that's not a good use of public funds, and that if we're expending those funds, you know, to a junior college and they're not being accepted by a university with the same public funds, that just doesn't make any fiscal sense or sense at all, and we'll work on that. Thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Yes.
So just to follow up that transfer question, there is a statute that says there's a 42-hour core curriculum that we offer that is approved by the state that should be honored at any and all state institutions of higher ed. So when a student completes the core at any college, any university, the receiving university or college should accept the entire 42-hour block because they have their own core, but if you complete the core somewhere, you've completed it there as well. And I think that's where the primary issue lies, is students that have completed core are not being core complete when they arrive there. So that's, and there is statute behind that. The other question, and it's not really a question, it's a comment, it's a statement on property tax. I understand it's going to be a hot topic this session. Just a brief history, we are a taxing entity. We serve 11 counties, we tax 3. Those are the three counties that voted themselves and created the district. In 2005, we had a tax rate of 9 cents per $100 valuation. We increased it that year by 2 cents to 11. And we maintained that same rate for 5 years. So I have an ultra-conservative board, especially when it comes to property taxes. In 2010, we went from 11 cents to 13 cents. Again, raised it 2 cents and maintained that same rate for another 7 years. In 2017, we went up from 13 cents to 16 cents, and that's the rate that we have right now. So if you look at our tax history, you see these big chunks of 5, 7 years where we just maintain that rate. We don't go up, and we find ways to make it work. In the previous session, there was talks about caps, and I'm glad to hear that it's not all about caps this time. Since we have a very low rate to begin with, when you apply the 4% or the 8%, 4% is half a penny in tax rate for us, and generates probably about $80,000, $90,000 for us, a 4% or half a penny. To run an election for 3 counties is $100,000. So as you tackle this problem of property tax, and I agree with you that nobody wants to pay more, and there's a lot of questions that we hear about appraisal value. But have that in mind where, you know, when we look at students and we talk about equity, different students need different things to bring them up to parity. Same thing with the taxing entities. There's those entities that are sitting at $1.30 And 4% of $1.30 is a lot of cents, where 4% of 16 cents is half a cent. For us, when we go up 2 cents, it's $50 a year for a $100,000 home, about $4 a month, and that's tough to get through my board, because that's, I look at it, it's a cup of coffee a day that we're asking the taxpayers to help us and be the driver that we are. We did a study, and it was $160 million that this institution drives in our regional economy, with our spending, with the advanced earnings that our graduates earn and spend in the community. So that's the investment that we ask the taxpayers to help keep this institution here. So I just ask that you be cognizant of the different impact that the reform will have on different entities. For us, the property tax, it helps maintain the facilities. That's all that it does. We have one of the highest tuition rates in the state. We're hover between number 12 and number 14, number 15 out of the 50 community colleges. Yet we live in the most probably depressed area for all the community colleges for a service area that we represent. So those are our three buckets: state appropriations, property taxes, and tuition fee revenue. Now, luckily, about 80% of our students are on Pell, so it doesn't hit their pocketbook directly. But just to make you aware and be cognizant of the impact of those reforms could have on an institution like ourselves.
Well, I appreciate that, and that is a profound thing there, because if you have a low tax rate like that, like you said, 4% or even 8%, it's still a pretty small amount of money. Currently, it's 8.5% to trigger a rollback, assuming that a rollback is called for by the voters. But I've never, and I've been on record voting for it, voting on this, but I've never been a fan of revenue caps or appraisal caps. I've always thought that it skewed the system, and I know, look, I own a bunch of rental property. That was what my retirement vehicle was all these years, was to acquire this rental property. Property taxes are 3.5 months worth of rent nowadays, and I never saw that one coming. So, I mean, it's personal with me, so I get it. But my view's always been that if you're going to have an appraisal, then it needs to say what the thing is worth, market value. And if it went up a bunch, well, it just went up a bunch. And the same thing with revenue caps. I've never been a fan, because the reason is because in my personal view, revenue caps, all they really are is smoke and mirrors for the leadership in the state of Texas that's been crying about this issue for a few years now, to act like they're doing something, particularly over in the Harris County area. And now there are certain things that need to be done in the appraisal process. Senator Flores is absolutely right. There are processes that need to be made that need to make it more friendly, user-friendly, particularly in the urban areas, because it's real confrontational there. Here in Uvalde County and Medina County, where our properties are, it's pretty easy, if you want to go in and talk to the appraiser. But anyway, back to the appraisal caps. To me, my view has always been that that's just a smoke and mirrors answer to make it look like you're really doing something when you're not prepared to do what's really, really hard and it is effective. And that is for the leadership of the state of Texas to have a real conversation about how we raise our revenue in the state of Texas. And they don't want to have that conversation because it's not good politics for their next statewide election. So they come up with revenue caps and things like this that, in my view, are just a way to avoid the real discussion that needs to be had. And of course, I get supported on that decision by all of the cities and counties and every taxing entity that I represent in 6 counties is always thankful for that particular stand that I've taken. But I'm for lower taxes, but I'm for an honest discussion about why those taxes are there and what they're being spent for, instead of the revenue caps. Last time they were trying to get it, I think it was 2.5% last time they were trying to get, or is it 2.5% they're trying to pass this time? But the discussion has changed some, and I don't know what Senator Flores' position is on caps and everything, but I do know that some of your colleagues are big fans of something, and they're very, very smart people. But I think that it's not, when you talk about a revenue cap, that's not a serious discussion that you're having there. And then you talk about, like yours, it's just, like I said, you know, a 4% cap on a, let's take a 20%, 20-cent tax rate, you know, that's, yeah, so anyway.
It's an extremely complicated issue, but primarily what the feedback I get from the county officials and cities that I was speaking to, and that's both sides of the aisle, was that whatever was done, like last time it only affected cities and counties, but not any of the other taxing entities. They said whatever is done, as long as it's done for us all, then we're good. But it's only just a few of us that we're not. That's part of it, which is why I talked about a holistic approach. And on the appraisal side, if you can't, I mean, if you're going cap and you're not going on the appraisal side, which is just a guess, really, then, and especially in the processes of the appraisal side. So how did you arrive at that? You know, it's really healthy to ask, why are you doing that? And if they can't answer, then you probably shouldn't be doing it. And a lot of times, well, those questions are asked, and I've asked the questions, why do you do it that way? Why? Explain that to me. And you can't. Well, that's just the way we do it. Well, that's not, that's bureaucracy, that's system, that's being in place, that's not service. And especially when it's skewed, where it's, you know, when I asked the question, you know, for example, in my property, I have 1.88 acres, my little piece of the Texas sky, strip of birds and oak trees, you know, but I'm very proud of it. Worked hard for it. There's 26,000 an acre valuation. My neighbor next door has two acres, just a few more. 22,000 an acre. My neighbor across the street, 3.9, 16,000 an acre. I said, how in the heck is that? Well, I used this. Well, what is it? Well, I'm not going to argue with you. Well, you need to explain it to me because, you know, you're costing me money here. And the law requires fair and equitable. Well, the reason they don't have to is because they don't have to right now. Each appraiser does it their own way. There's 254 different ways to arrive at appraisals. Did you know that? There's no statewide methodology. So they can all guess their own way. And each appraiser can do it their own way. And then the governance, which is supposed to be checks and balances, is very little governance and oversight from the boards. So we need to tighten that up. So that's the whole picture. But you're right. That those appraisals should be based on actual value. So I'm for eventually for what's called fair disclosure. Buy your property, must disclose it, whether you're commercial or residential, disclose it and it stays that way until you sell it, because that's the real value again. And meanwhile, it's reported to the taxing entities at that value, and you know what it is. Property owner knows what it is. Then we don't need appraisal districts. That saves billions. But it's too common sense. But it'll work. And it's based on what it actually sold for. But that's down the road. But with big items, you got to start somewhere. As I prefaced earlier in our visit today, first we have to have in our mind, where do we want to go? What is the big goal and objective for us? And being fair and equitable in our properties is where we want to go. Great education, public safety, infrastructure, workforce, things that are water, quality of life. That's where we want to go. That's what we should be sent to Austin for. Represent you. We need your input. We need it. Because if we don't have it, then all we got, you know who's going to be knocking at the door talking to us the most? Lobbyists. But we don't work for them. We work for you. So we need it. And you know, have honest conversations and expect honest feedback, you know. Hey, I don't know about that, but just check into it. And of course we have our philosophical fences. And you know where I stand, and you know where the representative stands. And we know that. There's fences where I don't go out of. But in the middle, let's do business. And you sent me there based on that. But I stand firmly, and I'm here because I truly believe I'm going to go over there and represent you. representation is what we needed here in the Senate. And I just like I did as a game warden in the field where I worked for my landowners in my community and had relationships, I intend to do the same thing in the Senate. On big issues, on the meat and potatoes, first. And property taxes, we've got to do it. School education, we've got to do it. Infrastructure, we've got to do it. Water, we've got to do it. Public safety, we've got to do it. These are not, we may do it. These are have-tos. And that's what we should do first. And that's what we intend to do. And we got a big system out there, folks. You know, and the representative's been around a while. He knows it's a big system. As I was asked the question, how is this going to affect the system? Well, it's not about affecting the system, it's about affecting you. That was my response. And that's going to be my response going forward. And so, we're with you. We want to do a holistic program. We're going to do this, we do it right. But if we're going to go in there and stick a Band-Aid on it and not being able to arrive at a win-win deal, I mean, if the House says one number and the Senate says another number, and if a small group says, well, you know, let's not have any compromise, and we don't say, if it's 6 and the other one says 4, and why can't we come to 5? And if it doesn't work, we come back in 2 years and we change it. That's the beauty of the statutory process. Statutory process, you can change the law. The only thing written in stone, in my humble opinion, is the 10 Commandments. Everything else is not. Legislature creates it, and the legislature may uncreate it. And regulation, that can be done annually by the agencies. Annually by the boards that regulate them. Not set in stone. If they don't work, we change them. If they work, we keep them. So that's kind of where I'm at on that.
So we're just about out of time. I would like to, first off, thank Representative King, Senator Flores for taking time to come and speak with us today and taking our questions. On behalf of the Faculty Association, I would like to thank Dr. Gonzalez for your information and support and encouragement in getting this all set up for us and getting it all set up. And hopefully this can become a normal incident that we can all get together and hear what you guys are doing and you can hear from us. We really do appreciate it. Thank you all also for coming. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Haynes. We appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I appreciate all of you again for allowing me to represent you in the Texas House of Representatives. And I want to just tell Senator Flores how much I look forward to working with you. I've known him for a long time, and he is an honorable man, and the title suits him very, very well. So thank you for the service that you have provided and that you are going to provide.
Thank you very much. And again, the two sides of every tortilla, we want to see both sides and we make the right decision and move forward. Thank you very much. Merry Christmas and God bless you.
We'll see you soon. We'll be all about the holidays.